Hey everyone, Teo1904 here, and in today's video I would like to show you the Werewolf Tornado Druid that I've been playing for the last couple of days and having a lot of fun with. It's definitely a different build to the pulverized build that I started with, which also was very powerful, but we can comfortably farm level 50 Nightmare Dungeons easily on this build, and I just want to share this with you guys to also fun with this build because it is amazing. It requires some items for minimum requirements, namely the Tempest Roar Helmet and the Dire Wolf aspect. Before we dive deeper into the build's itemization, I would like to show you the skill tree that I've been using for Nightmare tier 50-ish farming, and this is working absolutely fantastic. For the basic skill, this is Storm Strike. We are using this skill to have some higher uptime on Vulnerable, but the main focus here is the damage reduction for 3 seconds. You want to keep this up at all times because you are jumping into the fights, and yeah, you have to be a little bit tanky to do so. Next up in the core skill section, we are using Tornado with the Primal Tornado rune. This is generally speaking the best rune I felt to slow down enemies and be more tanky. You can also use Raging Tornado. I think these two are interchangeable, where Raging Tornado will increase your vulnerable uptime against single targets especially. Then we put 1 point into Heart of the Wild. We have to go through that to get to what impulses to increase our damage drastically. You can see here I have +3 from items. Those just the amulet that gives me +3 to wild impulses. Then I maxed out Predatory Instinct to increase our critical strike chance. And I'm not even going to attempt to pronounce this. I'm just refusing. We're using this to get some movement speed while we are in werewolf form. Then we are going for Vigilance. We are using Bloodhowl very, very frequently, so we get another 15% damage reduction from this. And as I just said, Bloodhowl with the Preserving Bloodhowl rune to increase our attack speed. This also heals us. That has a secondary function which comes into play when we are talking about the itemization. But in short, we're using the unique temerity, which benefits from the overheal or from this healing, creating a barrier for us. Then we have wolves with the Ferocious Wolf Pack glyph or rune upgrade. I don't know really how to call them at this point. These are just to soak up some damage. This is also what you are replacing later on if you are pushing the higher tier Nightmare Dungeons. Instead of the wolves, you want to then use Debilitating Roar with the Preserving Debilitating Roar upgrade in the end. This also needs some itemization changes in order to fit in, however. Then Nature's Reach, damage increase against distant enemies. We are very frequently in melee range, but our tornadoes obviously fly around all over the place, so this is very nice to have. Then we are using Elemental Exposure. This is just a 1-pointer for the additional vulnerable uptime, so nothing special here. Then we are using Hurricane. This is a very, very multi-purpose skill that we are using. First of all, it gives us damage reduction against monsters that are affected. Then we are slowing down enemies to decrease their damage output. And third thing is we are proccing the Spirit Boon. We're going to go through that in a second. With this skill to reduce our cooldown of Grizzly Rage. Gonna come and get to that as well in a second. And finally, we are generating some resources with a legendary node on our Paragon board. Oh, and one more thing. While Grizzly Rage is up, we are also increasing our critical strike damage whenever we are critting. So Hurricane just gives us the ability to stack up this mechanic of Grizzly Rage. Right. Next up, we are using Neurotoxin and Venom. This combination works really well when you are using Toxic Claws as a one-pointer, so your critical strike damage will be increased by 30%, and we're using a lot of tornadoes in Werewolf form, which triggers this effect of Toxic Claws to increase our damage and poison enemies. Then on this nature magic cluster, we're using Defiance maxed out, we're using Circle of Life. This again is very, very useful with Temerity, Unique Pants, and Resonance at the end. We're not triggering the bonus effect, unfortunately, but there's no real way to fit in a Earth skill while in Werewolf form, so this is just a flat damage increase. We are using Defensive Posture. This is to increase how much Fortify we're getting from Grizzly Rage. However, we're not really frequently absolutely fortified. We're just trying to get this up as much as possible to benefit from the damage reduction. And leading into this, we are using Grizzly Rage with its upgrades. This is a crucial part of the build. We are turning into a werewolf and we're dealing a lot of damage doing so, and we are turning into a werewolf. This is very important, using the aspect of Dire Wolf on either ring, could be any of these slots. Going back to the skill tree, as a final point, we're using Perfect Storm. A lot of people ask me why don't we use Earth and Might, and the answer is Tornado has a horrible lucky hit chance. This procs very infrequently, and I personally don't really enjoy the playstyle around this. We also don't need the Spirit Generation. This would be just to generate a guaranteed crit, and I think overall the Perfect Storm skill or passive is much better. With also granting 1 spirit per cast. I would love to have this at like 2, but then I guess resources would never be an issue. Alright, I've already been hinting at this, so let's have a look at the spirit boons of this build. We are using Wariness on the Deer Spirit, then Avian Wrath for additional critical strike damage on the Eagle Spirit. You can also use Scythe Talons to increase the amount of crit chance. Both of these are absolutely fantastic. I also was playing around a little bit with the swooping attacks, which you can also include for more attack speed, for more tornado output. But I would say, generally speaking, the Avian Wrath runs supreme on this build. Next up on the Wolf is Calamity. We need to increase the duration of our Grizzly Rage as much as possible. We unfortunately don't get a 100% uptime anymore. That's like borderline impossible unless you have a nightmarish amount of monsters on one spot. So yeah, this is what we are going with here. And finally on the Snake Spirit, which funnily enough transforms into a deer when we are actually selecting bonding with it. We are using Masochistic. Again, Temerity is the keyword here. We are healing ourselves over the maximum, therefore we are creating barrier. This is where itemization comes into the place. And finally, we're using Calm Before the Storm. This is another way to increase our uptime of our ultimate skill, which is Grizzly Rage, and this is very important as we are dealing a lot more damage in this scenario. The next thing I would like to talk about is the itemization of this build. There's 3 critical items. Let's go through them first. We are looking at Tempest Roar here, the unique helmet. This can drop in tier 3 or tier 4. And this is turning our storm skills into werewolf skills, meaning Hurricane, Storm Strike, and Tornado are now also werewolf skills and shape-shifting skills if you are looking at the tags here. This is very important because we are turning our Grizzly Rage into the Dire Werewolf form with the Dire Wolf aspect. This allows us to now cast all these 3 skills that I just mentioned again, Hurricane, Storm Strike, and Tornado while we are in Grizzly Rage form. Just a simple showcase. Here, when I have the Grizzly Rage up, we can use all these 3 skills. Next up is Temerity. This is a massive boost up to our defenses. Let's go through the defenses next. With Circle of Life and the Spirit Boon, we are generating a lot of healing, with which allows us to have a high uptime on this barrier that you're creating. And the barrier just simply soaks up some damage that you are taking. The next slot is defensively the armor. We are using the might aspect here. You can also use vigorous or disobedience. I found might, however, to be the most consistent version of the 3 to increase our survivability. Then for utility, we're using Wind Striker here. This is mainly used on while we are just farming in the open world. When we are pushing into the high tier dungeons, then we need to actually switch this to Dark Howl, which turns the debilitating roar skill into a werewolf skill as well, to use to decrease the enemy's damage by 70%. And then we have 5 offensive slots. We have gloves, 2 rings, totem, and our one-handed weapon. The aspects that we are putting on these are absolutely interchangeable. It doesn't matter in which slot you are putting them. It's just important that you have all 5 of them. So first of all, we use Conceited on, here in this case, our gloves. Then we have Accelerating. We have the Direwolf aspect that I already mentioned. We are using Rampaging Werewolves, and finally, in this version, I am using Edgemaster. You can also use the Blood Howl aspect that, or is it called the Night Howl aspect, that increases your critical strike chance by 10% when you are using Blood Howl. And finally, also very critical actually on this build, is the Storm Chaser. We are putting this on your amulet because we want to reach the 5 targets on this amulet. As we don't have a 2-handed weapon, we can't get to 6, but this is a massive damage increase that is very hidden. Because when we are casting Tornado, it just randomly wanders off. When it is seeking out targets, it is just more, it just stays on your screen a much longer time, which allows it to deal its periodic damage much more often, and this is absolutely fantastic, especially on single target. You may have noticed that we are not really talking about each individual item slot in terms of the affixes that you are looking for. For this, I would like to defer you to my written guide on maxwell.gg. Link in the description below, where we are listing the stats in priority from top to bottom, what you are looking for on each item slot and what is important. Second board that we are attaching is the Ancestral Guidance board, where we are bolting for the legendary nodes and pick up Reclamation, then Spiritual Power, pick up the Glyph Socket and put in Territorial, pick up all the Dexterity nodes to make this as powerful as possible. Then we go up into Thunderstruck, where we are putting the Protector Glyph, and we are picking up the legendary node through Deluge, and that's all that we are doing on this board. We're just leaving it right away again to go over to the Constricting Tendrils board, where we are simply picking up the glyph and leaving right away. This is where we are putting our exploit, so we allocate all the dexterity nodes here as well. Then we go down into Heightened Malice. You can either attach it through the left side first or from the top, doesn't really matter. We're picking up the Heightened Malice legendary node, and we're putting this point here because it's just a 1-pointer that gives us a decent chunk of life. And then from the left side through the Ancestral Guidance board, we are picking up the glyph socket where we place spirit, and like, again, like pick up all the dexterity that we can. Unfortunately, we are missing like 2 points here. I'm not really sure where I could like save them, maybe to actually maximize this dexterity, but this is what I got so far. I guess we could leave these out, but I think these are very, very strong. And finally, we are attaching Lust of Carnage, where we again pick up the legendary note and the 2 point of ferocity. Again, we can just place them in the dex note here instead. I think this is more powerful, however. And that's it for the Paragon board. And finally, I'm gonna send you off with some footage of a tier 50 Nightmare dungeon that I'm playing through here. This is Blind Boros, one of the stronger dungeons for this build. Obviously, you can see that I'm using Hurricane while I'm in Dire Wolf form. I'm using once in a while a Storm Strike hit, and then we are spamming a lot of Tornado, while we are also using Bloodhowl to heal and to increase our attack speed. And of course use Grizzly Rage at all times as much as we can, because we want to get that unstoppable effect and the increased damage, and many more things that are probably too detailed to get into in here. Okay, I will send you off with this. Thank you everybody for watching. I will see you in the next build guide. Today I will be testing out the human version of this build, and hope that I can get you a video guide on that soon as well. Catch you guys later, and have a good one. Have fun with this build.